Hey there, and welcome to another Java Basics video on the Future Programmer YouTube channel. Today's video is all about the ArrayList class in Java programming and how you can use ArrayLists to store array-like data. So without further ado, let's get into it. In the last video of this course, we talked about arrays in Java and how you can use them to store lists of values as collections. Today, you're going to learn about the ArrayList class, which is another way of storing array-like data in Java. So first off, what is the difference between arrays and ArrayLists? The main difference is that arrays have fixed sizes. In other words, after you declare the size of an array in the array declaration, you cannot modify the length of that array. So if you made an array that is 5 elements long, you cannot add a 6th element later in your program. On the other hand, the size of an array list is dynamic, which means that it can be changed after the array list was initially made. So if you made an array list that initially stored 20 elements, and later you want to add another element to it, you can now make it store 21 elements. So now let's talk about making array lists. Before we can use array lists and make array lists, we have to first import the ArrayList class at the top of our Java program. So the way how we can do that is quite similar to how we can import the scanner class that we used for user inputs. So we write import java.util.ArrayList. Notice the capital A and capital L here. These are required. So if I copy this line to the top of a Java program and run it, notice how it's outside of our class. It's not part of our main method or our main class. It's at the very first line of our program. And if you have multiple imports, say if you imported something else here, you can just write it on another line afterward. It has to be before our class. So we can see hello world since we didn't change anything in the main method. So nothing changed in the output. So now we can create array lists in our program. The syntax for doing so is quite a bit different from declaring primitive data types and arrays. So here's the general syntax. We write array list. Notice how the L is also capitalized in addition to the A here. And then in angle brackets, we write a lesser than sign and a greater than sign. So this is known as angle brackets, inside of which we put the data type of our array list. So we can only store one type of data inside of one array list, which is the same as array. So we can make an array list of strings or maybe numbers or booleans like other data types. And then we write variable name is equal to new array list, and then this is the same thing as what is written right here. And then we put a pair of parentheses, semicolon. So if we want to make an array list storing strings, we can just write array list and then in angle brackets, string names is equal to new array list, angle brackets, string, parentheses, semicolon. So if I copy this line of code and replace hello world with it, now running this program, we should see nothing printed out and no errors thrown. So we can see nothing indeed got printed out, which means that our program was able to run successfully. Something to note, which is pretty important, is that array lists can only store objects and not primitive data types. A general rule of thumb of telling the difference between the two is that objects are capitalized, while primitive data types are entirely lowercase. This is generally the case, not always, but generally the case so far along our course. So for example, a string is actually different in nature from int, double, and boolean. These three are all primitive data types, whereas a string is technically an object. So a string can be stored inside of an array list by doing this. So we can just write string here, and boom, that's all good. To store a primitive data type in an array list, we have to use the data type's wrapper class. So string, for example, does not need to use a wrapper class, whereas an int, double, or boolean, when put inside of an array list, we have to declare the array list to take the wrapper class of those data types. So the wrapper class of an int, for example, is integer. Notice how the I is capitalized. So integer, double, nothing changed besides the D is now capitalized, and Boolean also got an uppercase B instead of a lowercase one. So here are some examples of array lists storing primitive data types. So if I copy these code, notice how the inside of the angle brackets, now we put the wrapper class of our primitive data types inside of our ArrayList declaration. So if I just put this inside of our program, we should see nothing printed out. So that's perfect. So now let's talk about ArrayList operations. After we declare an ArrayList, it's empty. And we can perform operations on that ArrayList using methods of the ArrayList class. And here are some of the most important. First and foremost, we need some data in our ArrayList. So we need to use the add method to add elements to our ArrayList. So here, let's just use the int ArrayList, which we made up here. Int.add 1. Int.add 2. Pretty simple. We're just adding 1 to our int ArrayList, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. So after these 4 lines are run, our ArrayList will look like 1, 2, 3, and 4. And notice how even though we declared our ArrayList to take integer instead of just normal ints, we don't have to do anything specific when we add elements to an ArrayList because there's an implicit process going on in the back where the ints are actually changed into integers. So we can just write this, and if I just clear out some of these programs like this, and if I run this program right now, we should see no errors thrown. So that's good. Now let's talk about accessing elements of an ArrayList. Now, in the last video, we talked about how we can index items of an array. The difference from arrays when accessing items in ArrayLists is that instead of putting the index in square brackets after the array, we pass them into the get method of the ArrayList class. So instead of writing int square brackets 0, we write int dot get, and then in parentheses, we pass in 0, which means that we're getting the first element of the int ArrayList, so the 0 index, and then this is the 4th item, the 3rd index. So let me copy these 2 lines of code into our program. And we get 1 and 4 printed out. Perfect. So this is the 0th index, and this is the 3rd index. So now let's talk about modifying items of an ArrayList. To change the value of an ArrayList at a certain index, we use the set method. We pass 2 values into it, and the first one is the index, where the new value is being set. And the second is the value we're setting at the first index. So if we want to make the first item, the 0 index of int, to be -9, we can write int.set, and then we pass the index 0, and then the new value -9. Int.set through -5 will set the 3rd index of int to be -5. So if I copy these 2 lines of code, let's just do it before our print statements. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna print this out and then set the new values before I print these values out again. So we should see 1 and 4, and then -9 and -5, because after the set method was called on lines 12 and 13, the int array or ArrayList was modified to store -9 and -5 at the 0th and 3rd index. Now, to see the length of an array list, we use the size method to see how many elements there are in an array list. So int.size. Notice the parentheses here. If you remember from the last video, we use the .length property, the attribute length of an array to see its length. And we did not put parentheses after the word length. And that's because in an array, the length is static, whereas in an array list, size is actually a method. So because int has a dynamic length, we call a method to get its length. So let's take a look at how many elements there are inside of our array list. We should see 4. And indeed, we got the number 4 printed out. Now let's talk about the last thing, which is removing items. So if we want to remove an item from an array list, we can just call the remove method, passing in the index where the value we want to remove is at. Or we can call the clear method to remove all the values from an array list, essentially clearing it of all the values. So if I want to delete the value of int at index 2, we can write int.remove and then pass in the number 2 into this method call. And int.clear will just clear everything. So why don't I delete those lines since they're pretty useless? And let me just comment the second line out so we don't run it right now. And int.remove 2 will now delete the number 3 from our array list. So our array list will have 1, 2, and 4. These are the 3 elements in our int array list. So if I actually print out system.out.println int.size, we will actually see that the size of our array list is now 3 instead of 4 because we removed 1 element from our array list. So now it's a length of 3. If I, on the other hand, delete the remove statement and move this print statement after the clear statement, we should see the int.size will give us a value of 0 because we cleared all the elements of int, so there is nothing inside of it. So the size is 0. So in this exercise, make an array list storing true or false values. Remember to use the wrapper class of whatever primitive data type is true and false. Add some values, change some values, remove some values, print some values, and then loop through some values and preferably print some values out. You can do those in the same step if you want. And although we didn't really talk about specifically how we can loop through an array list, you know how to get an item from an array list, how you can access an element from an array list. Combined with the knowledge of looping through an array in the last video, you should have a pretty good idea of how to loop through an array list. So take a few moments to do that. And here is one example of what you could have written. So ArrayList, Boolean. We're making a Boolean array list. Notice the B here is uppercase, which means that we're actually wrapping, or we're using the wrapper class of Boolean instead of the primitive data type with the lowercase b. We're making this variable called yes or no equals to new array list Boolean parentheses semicolon yes or no dot add true dot add false dot add true again. And then we're setting the first element, the 0th index of yes or no, to be false. And then we're removing the second element of yes or no, so the first index. Take a minute, think about what is the current elements of yes or no. So we did these 3 things, or I guess it's 5 things, but there are kind of 3 sections of our program. So now we should have an array list that has the value of false and then true, because the 0th index, this is false. This got removed, so we have false and true. This line, you can kind of ignore it as part of our array list because we removed this thing on this line. And so here we're printing out the elements of yes or no using a for loop. This is different than what we did in the last video where we used a loop that goes up. It went from 0 and the condition was less than 0. Or sorry, less than the length of our array. This time I did it the opposite way where we started one less than the size of our array list and it goes all the way down to 0, decrementing. Think about the size of the array, or sorry, the size of the array list. It has a size of 2. 2 minus 1 is equal to 1. So the first value that I will take on is 1. So it's going to first print out the second element of our array list, and then the first. So let's take a look at this entire thing, not just the for loop. What will happen if I run this program? So we got true and false. That is the in reverse order of our array list. So we have true and then we have false put up as the first element. So that is indeed correct. And to summarize, that's it for this lesson about array lists. Sometimes this data type is more convenient than using arrays because of its more dynamic nature. And that's it for this video about array lists in Java programming. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to this channel down below. And also make sure to leave a thumbs up if you found this video helpful. With that said, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in future tutorials.